Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope, this time for October 23rd through October 30th of 2022. My name is Cam White. Thank you guys so much for being here. You guys know the drill, which means you know what's up this week. This is, I was thinking a second ago, I'm going to start off being like, this is the best week ever, and be like super sarcastic. But the thing I really want to say about this week is this is that pivot moment. What's weird about being an astrologer, at least to, a lot of you have been doing astrology for some time, but maybe you don't watch all of the transits all of the time. And it's easy to look at transits and think, oh, that's going to happen and I'll be like that then. But it's hard to there's like a cognitive dissonance of, seeing a transit and trying to reflect on what it might mean. And why I'm bringing that up is this week, as everything really pivots, you're going to see a mass shift in the energy. But I also think that you're going to be able to really put two and two together when it comes to what all of these transits mean. To go over the highlights that we have this week, one, we have the solar eclipse in Scorpio. We should be familiar with that. What's interesting? This is the first set of eclipses we have in Scorpio. I want you to think for a minute here. So we actually had one, technically an eclipse in Scorpio last year. That was in November. Specifically, that was November 12th of 2021. On November 12th, Venus entered shadow, and before Venus had that retrograde in Capricorn. But at that time, the nodes were still in Sagittarius and Gemini. So it wasn't actually an eclipse in Scorpio and Taurus, even though it was. But that was like the only one that we got. This is like our first set of eclipses in Scorpio and Taurus. In the Scorpio realm, on the South Node realm. We had eclipses in the spring that were like in Taurus, and we had a lunar eclipse in Scorpio, but that was like the sun in Taurus on Rahu. It was way different. This is a way different energy, so this is going to be very new in a lot of ways. We have the solar eclipse in Scorpio we're starting the week off with. We have Mercury trining Mars. I actually really like that. I guess it's a little bit of an alleviation. It is a highlight, but it's really like kind of a background thing. Like any other week, this would be a big highlight, but this is kind of a background thing for this week. Jupiter goes back into Pisces. I would say this is good. I just feel like this is going to be kind of a little bit more hardcore and gnarly than people kind of anticipated and expected. Mercury enters Scorpio too. There's a lot of truth coming out, I think, during this week. And Mars goes retrograde. I've been hounding this for weeks now, for months now. Mars went into Gemini in August, and Mars is going to be in Gemini from August, September, October, November, December, January, February, all the way to the end of March, like a full 8 months. I see a lot of astrologers saying Mars will be in Gemini for 7 months. It's 8 months. Anyway, Mars goes retrograde. What has been going on since August? What have you been doing? Constantly going back and forth with what information are you working with? Mars is action, drive, energy. Have you been more stimulated? Have you been focused on information? As Mars goes retrograde, it's literally going backwards. We're having a big slowdown with our energy. Anyway, I need to talk about all this, so let's start moving forward. On Monday, the only thing we've got going on is the moon is going to make a conjunction to Mercury, and the moon will make a trine to Mars. Hold on, that doesn't sound right. Let me check my paper real quick. Oh, okay, maybe that is right. I'm wrong. The moon's going to conjoin Mercury, and the moon will trine Mars. That's right, because the moon's in Libra at this time. So the big thing with this is, what I do like about this is the dark moon phase before the eclipse, right? So there's sort of this kind of, it's kind of like at the movie theater when the lights go down, and it's before the movie starts and before the previews start, but the lights go down, so everyone's like, ooh, let's get quiet. That's like my favorite part of the movies. But the moon is dark at this point, and it's going to conjoin Mercury, and then it's going to start to trine Mars. So as the moon conjoins Mercury, again, moon's our emotions, moon's how we're feeling. Moon will tell you kind of what's going on day to day with people. It's in Libra. We're trying to connect. We're trying to relate. We're trying to create peace. We're trying to create harmony. And the moon's going to conjoin Mercury, where, again, Mercury is ideas, rationale, planning, logistics. And so the moon conjoining Mercury is like having that conversation, having some type of connecting point. But as the moon conjoins Mercury and then trines Mars in Gemini, you guys got to see, Mars isn't even stationed retrograde until Sunday, and Mars is motionless at this point. So I really think with the moon making this trine to Mars, there's this sort of like, Mars is, again, fights, conflict, separating, cutting. It's in the sign of words. I don't know if you guys have noticed how much Mars and Gemini shit's been going on. I think I said this before, like last week we had like the World Chess Championship. Like the guy got accused for cheating. Poker got accused for cheating. Fisherman got accused for cheating. I mean, there's so much Mars and Gemini stuff kind of going on at the moment. I forgot there was a few other things. Oh, everyone, I think SJ even talked about this, like people burning their energy bills in Europe and stuff like that. But as the moon makes a trine to Mars, there's sort of this click that sort of happens of there's a conversation that happens, and then when the moon trines Mars, I think there's this like this moment of like, oh, this is what I should do, but instead of doing it, Mars is motionless, where it's kind of like, oh, this is what I have to do, but you're kind of realizing, not that you're wrong, but what you have to do is different. I think you're going to really realize what the Mars retrograde's about probably on Monday, and it's probably going to be through this conversation. And this conversation looks like a nice conversation. It doesn't look bad, but as it trines Mars, there's this sort of taking in this information, taking in, especially with relationships, and Mars is just not moving. So there's this sort of like, almost like paralysis that comes with it. And that really leads us into what, Tuesday? And Tuesday's when we have the eclipse. Tuesday, the moon will go into Scorpio. The moon actually goes into Scorpio super duper early Tuesday morning. And we have the solar eclipse in Scorpio. I love this little glyph that Hugh made. I don't know if you guys know Hugh Tran. Hugh Tran is the guy that made these glyphs, and I really love the eclipse glyph. Shout out Hugh. Anyway, this eclipse, so it actually happens early in the morning. As you guys can kind of see here, the moon will be pretty far separated from here, but there's a few things to focus on. One is it's an eclipse in Scorpio. We haven't had a solar eclipse in Scorpio yet. But two, it's on Venus. When you're talking about Venus, we're talking about, again, love, beauty, romance, connection, fun, indulgences, right? Art, music. When Venus is in detriment, I've said this before, there's this kind of feeling of going without pleasure. Or you could say going without pleasure, or you could say finding pleasure in things like pain, or, you know, I think of Venus in Scorpio as very gothy, and not like there's a few different types of goth. I look at Venus in Scorpio as like the goth that wears like the white makeup, black lipstick, like kind of goes a little bit all out because it's Venus, right? Venus is about like beauty, and like there's the kind of goth of like Capricorn and Sagittarius that's much more just wears all black and looks more casual and is just more like deeper, versus like Venus and Scorpio is like all out with the decorations and the makeup and the aesthetic. But as there's an eclipse on Venus, eclipses are portals, eclipses are gateways. And as this kind of portal hits Venus in this negative way, there's sort of this, again, going without pleasure sort of thing. I think as Venus is in Scorpio too, and we have Venus in Scorpio for a while, there's a lot of pain that's going to get brought up. I mean, I can't bring up enough about the pain stuff that's going to be happening here. But as Venus is here, there's sort of like, I don't want to say enjoying the pain, because it's important to have nuance around that. Like, for example, some of you are into really wild, freaky sex, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And you could ascribe that to Venus and Scorpio, like if you're into the BDSM stuff or whatever. But the way I look at this is there's sort of this enjoyment of being raw, of being like, have you ever been in a relationship and you kind of just had like a big fight, and then like you ended up like having makeup sex afterwards in like this weird way where it's like the fighting was hot and turned on? That's kind of like this energy in a sense. I don't think I'd recommend that just because it's an eclipse, but it's an eclipse. Eclipses are like emergency events. Eclipses are like, you got to drop whatever you're doing, and this is what's going on. And this is happening on Venus. We're talking about pleasure, connection, fun. And there is some sort of either big disappointment here, or just kind of like, I think the way to get out of a disappointment would be, for example, Venus and Scorpio, back to the goth aesthetic, is like, if you get like a goth girl and she is like not accepting the fact that she's goth and she's like trying to be more girly girl or whatever, that might feel uncomfortable. She's like, no, I really like the dark aesthetics. No, I really like this kind of stuff. There's more of a comfortability there, right? It's not as much of a shock. This is one of those days where I think you need to lean into this energy a little bit more, because I think if you resist it, it's going to, come up a lot harder. It's the same thing like if you are driving on ice and you hit your brakes, you're just going to slip and go even more sideways. Maybe letting off the gas or maybe hitting the gas a little bit more will put you a little bit more in control with it. But this eclipse is, I mean, it's definitely villain origin story kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of pain involved. I think there's a lot of resentment. I think there's a lot of hurt feelings. It's Venus and Scorpio. Venus and Scorpio is very like, you hurt me, and now because of that, I'm never going to let it go. And it's kind of immature, but I look at this as a day where it's going to be very clear what you don't want. It's going to be a day where it's very clear what isn't pleasurable, what doesn't feel good. And I think that needs to be brought into your attention, because this is the time to really like get rid of the stuff that you don't want. I've said this ad nauseum at this point. This Mars retrograde is the time to make really big long-term changes. Not just like, oh, I'm going to start waking up at 5 a.m. now. It's like, okay, like that's like a change that you could just wake up and start any day. But like, what does it mean to wake up at 5 a.m.? What are you trying to get done in the day? Are you trying to be a morning person? You know, what do you have to shift in your lifestyle to make it to where you can be successful at waking up at 5 a.m. all the time? And it's not even just about, you know, waking up early. It's kind of, I think you guys know what I'm trying to say here, but the thing is, I think you're going to realize what no longer serves you, what you don't, what you no longer want. Also on the world stage, this week is not looking good on the world stage, by the way, like on some real shit. And I've tried to warn you guys, I've been saying it from the top of my lungs for a while now. This is a really big shift in the world. And so I think you're going to see a lot, like, for example, don't go on Twitter. There's going to be tons of articles and tons of things that are going to be like, this is what I hate about eclipses, is like when you go online on an eclipse, there's always something that happens and it's the biggest deal ever. And oh my God, like the last eclipse was monkeypox. And do we even talk about monkeypox anymore? No. But that was like one of the last set of eclipses that we had, was the monkeypox thing. And the whole world freaked out about that for like 5 seconds. Now, this is going to be an emergency type of event, but I really think this is a time to purge and just like, look, like, what do you not like? I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. Venus and Scorpio is like, not abstinence, but what's a celibacy. I was like, what's that word? Like going without pleasure might be better for you. Venus and Scorpio is finding pleasure in the pain, in the energy, in the commitment, in that Scorpio stuff is like, you know, what I love about Scorpio stuff is that it's like, in order to, you got to think of the Scorpio-Taurus axis. The Taurus is like, for example, we have a beautiful society where we have clean roads. I watch so many videos about just different countries, and it how disgusting some other countries are just makes me so fucking grateful for how clean this country is. And don't get me wrong, I'm totally down to trash this place because it's dirty. It is, I mean, when I say trash, I mean trash talk, because it's dirty as fuck. But we're so clean compared to other countries. And it's so clean. We have these beautiful roads and there's food in the grocery stores. In order to do all of that, in order to have all of this stability and all of this good stuff, you got to do the Scorpio stuff. How do you think shit leaves your house? There are underground sewage systems that take your poop and that process it away from the city, away from where you're at, and clean up the water and deal with it. If you want the Taurus stuff, you got to do the Scorpio stuff. You're not going to have these clean cities and clean fruits and vegetables if you don't even have a sewage system. You got to go into that sewage system and you got to clean that shit out. If any of you guys live up in like the mountains or live up more rurally, and you have what are those things called? The big shit box. Septic tank. Every now and then, if you don't constantly put the stuff in your septic tank to like clean it out, you're going to have to do a big clean out of your septic tank. This is that. And no one wants to clean out the septic tank, but you got to do it. Or if I got van life people that have to deal with their shit all the time, that's what this is. This is not what you want to do. It's not going to be fun. Well, you could make it fun. I think it could be like, I mean, you can make anything fun. Like if you are doing dirty work and it is intense, it can be fun. You just got to make it fun. You got to actually want to enjoy it, right? Maybe throw a little shit on people or something like that. I mean, don't do that. I think you guys are getting you get what I'm trying to say here. But on Tuesday, this is an eclipse, right? This is like your septic tank all of a sudden overflows and you look in your backyard and there's shit everywhere. Like, it's not like I'm going to clean the septic tank next week. It's you got to clean the septic tank right fucking now. And that's not going to feel good. However, I think if you're aware of it and you just lean into it. Like the biggest thing with astrology is astrology gives us a set of things to look at of where we can have our expectations more guided towards. Like, For example, you could look at this and say, oh my God, I'm going to die. And it could be like the worst thing ever, but it probably won't be. But if you're expecting something to be more negative, it's going to be easier for you to take on versus if you're like, it's Tuesday, October 25th. I'm going to have the best day ever. And then you get served with this stuff. It's going to be a little bit not fun. But I think if you see this and you just know that on Tuesday, you're probably going to feel like, again, it's going to feel like an emergency. If your septic tank is overflowing and your backyard is flooded with piss and shit, it's going to feel like an emergency because it's going to be really gross and a health hazard. So that's one of those things. This is like a health hazard. This is like, it's going to feel like an emergency. And when you look back and you handle the septic tank, you're like, oh, it wasn't that bad, but it'll feel like that in this moment. So it's not necessarily about like embracing the emergency, but taking action when it happens, right? When there's a house fire and you call 911 and the firefighters respond, they don't go, oh my God, a house fire. Ah, la, 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 la. They go, oh, a house fire. Okay, let's suit up. Let's go. Let's handle it. That's what you should be doing during this time. I don't think you should be like overwhelmed and freaking out about it, but just know like it's like if you're a firefighter and you get a call and there's a house fire, like they're not freaking out. Like this is their everyday thing, which is a little bit different. So I think you might freak out a little bit more because this isn't a normal thing for you. But it's just one of those things of like, don't worry about it. Don't be a chicken with its head cut off running around. Like embrace it and handle it. Respond. Don't react. And that's a big thing I actually want to bring up real quick because I know I'm riffing on this for like 20 minutes. Don't react. It's going to be really easy to react and make really dumb decisions. Like, for example, I mean, like, it's just one of those things where just don't do something stupid because this is like, and like on some real shit right now. Not everyone here watching, but we all know people that have had experiences with alcohol, drugs, and something happens to them in their life. And so they go drink and then all of a sudden they go drive around and wrap their car around a tree. You know, this is one of those things where if you're going to have a shitty day, do not like react to it by indulging in bullshit. Like this is one of those days where it is going to be hard, but you can easily make this day 10,000 times worse if you make stupid fucking decisions. So try not to be stupid. Seriously. Like I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. A lot of you guys struggle. Not everyone's struggling that watches my show. I have a lot of people that are very successful and a lot of people that struggle. But for the people that really struggle, like don't be fucking dumb. Don't do something that you're going to regret or that's going to cause hurt or pain to other people, especially yourself. Because there's a lot of triggers on this day that's going to bring that stuff up. It's going to be really easy to self-harm or to self-medicate or use substances to your detriment. Really be careful. And I'm not saying, like, look, if you're a user, use, but don't, like, fucking overdose. Like, fucking just be smart, okay? Like, you can be in the pain, you can be in the sorrow, but don't let that emotional volatility make you react and do something equally as, like if you have an emergency event over here, don't react with the same amount of weight that has on the other side of it. Respond to it. Be a little bit more clear-headed. It's so important because this is just one of those things where shit can go south really quick if you're going to be dumb. I think if you're smart, you'll be fine. You know, there's going to be a lot of people that are like, for example, I try not to tell people, like, don't just sit in your house during the eclipse. This is one of those days where it's like, okay, I always try to tell people, if you've never been rock climbing before, or like, ladies, don't go on a first date on this day. How about that? Put it off for a little while. Like, that's one of those things of like, don't do something you don't normally typically do that could involve horrible circumstances. Take it easy. You don't need to just hide in your house. But like, for example, if you're driving around, wear a seatbelt. Like maybe pay attention a little bit more normally than you would. Or pay attention a little bit more than you normally would. But anyway, I'm going off too much off this. But I mean, after that eclipse, the moon's just going to be in Scorpio for a couple days. And it's just going to be rough. But I want you to embrace that Scorpio purge and that pain and that depth. Like, you're here. I want you to think about this for a minute. I think I've explained this before. I can't believe how long I'm going off on this. But I want you to imagine there's a big rubber band right here. And above this rubber band is like positivity, money, family, love, hope. And below is like pain, resentment, trauma, all of this stuff. The whole Scorpio axis is this idea of pulling this rubber band down all the way and sinking in that feeling. And you're going to pull yourself down all in the treachery and the bullshit. And the whole point of Scorpio is about letting go. I've talked about this a lot. Scorpio is all about letting go because it's really easy to hold on to stuff because Scorpio is the roots of the tree that sink underneath the ground that suck up all the energy to keep the tree stabilized. That's Scorpio is about holding on, right? So it's about holding on. It's about holding on. But as it goes deeper and lower and lower and lower and lower and you get to all this negative stuff, there's a moment where you have to let go. And then when you shoot up, the lower that you bring this rubber band down, the higher you're going to shoot up. And that's like the Sagittarius stuff where it's like vision, hope, abundance. So there's a mixture here. I think it's about, there's this idea of like, you know, if you just hold on to the rubber band a little bit and you just kind of pull it a little bit down, you're not going to go that high up. But if like, we're in Scorpio season, guys, I've tried to say this before. I said this last year. Everything's dead. Everything's dying. This is like astrology is a practice of time honoring. Honor this time. What do you need to get down to the like roots to? What do you need to like what is your Scorpio stuff? Like what is underneath the surface? What is in your basement that people don't know? And you don't need to tell everybody, but what do you have hidden that you need to like take care of before it gets worse? That's what you need to be doing during this time. I got to move on. We get to Wednesday. Moon goes opposite Uranus and then squares Saturn and then trines Neptune and then Mercury trines Mars. Wednesday doesn't make it any easier because on Wednesday, the moon will go opposite Uranus and square Saturn. It ain't easy. Pimping ain't easy, but somebody's got to do it. That's the way I would look at this. It's like, for example, my stepdad just had to yank out a tree at the house because this tree in the front yard, the roots were so long, the tree was so big that it was breaking apart the concrete. This is one of those days where, you know, with the moon first making opposition to Uranus and then squaring Saturn, it's like, if you've never cut a tree down before, maybe hire a professional. Nothing happened at my stepdad's place, but this is like, if you got to cut down a tree, maybe watch a YouTube video about it. Because if you're just cutting down a tree and you're not paying attention, that tree can just collapse and land on your house. That tree, when you cut it, could just snap and it could bounce back and kill you. That's a whole nother thing. But this moon in Scorpio going opposite Uranus squaring Saturn is, for example, also too, if you, I know I have guys that watch me. I don't know how many of you are construction workers, but in the construction field, you usually want to know what pipes are underneath the ground before you dig. This is one of those moments where it's like, you might start digging to handle that stuff underneath, and then all of a sudden you hit a pipe and it's flooding and you're done for the day. That's kind of this moment where I think if you do the Scorpio stuff and you do that depth stuff, it ain't going to be easy. The universe is going to throw you such a fat challenge. Like, this seems so much like the eclipse is one thing, but this just looks fucking triggering. Like, you're like, okay, this is an eclipse. I'm full of hurt, but I'm going to do the thing that I need to do. And then it's like moon opposite Uranus square Saturn, where it's like have you ever tried to make something better in your life? And then right as you did that, the universe just gave you fucking something just to make it worse. That's Wednesday. And again, that's not always bad. I think in hindsight, it will be funny. In the moment, it will be, you know, I think a lot of you will suffer through it. But I think a lot of this is like, hey, you're going to run into challenges. You're going to run into pitfalls. The moon opposite Uranus is very like, oh, like, you know, emotional instability. You know, don't just start digging for the sake. If like you want to build a house, don't just start digging. Call the number. What is the number? Is it 611 or is it 511? There's a number that you call to dig so you can know what power lines, what sewage lines, what water lines run underneath the dirt. Maybe check if there's stuff underneath there before you start digging. Because I think if on Wednesday you just start digging, something's going to come up that you don't want to come up, and it's going to fucking halt shit because it's going to square Saturn. So call before you dig. That's just, I think that's really funny. But, and then after that, the moon will be trining Neptune. So I think as the moon's trining Neptune, the hard part about the moon trining Neptune is like, for example, if you read someone's messages that you probably shouldn't be reading, it's going to be really easy to start making up stories about everything that's going on. Like moon trining Neptune is like, oh my gosh, it's this, it's that, and blah, 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 blah. Like, try not to make up stories of what's happening. Like the moon trining, I think as the moon's in Scorpio trining Neptune and Pisces, I think this will be an easier time. Like, it's going to be really easy to make up stories and make up, you know, bullshit around that you're thinking of. I think the way out of this would be to like relax yourself and like really get into some spiritual stuff. Like go and do some like labor that you can really focus your energy on. Like it's Like, do something with your hands that you can focus on and get your mind off of things versus don't be like, if you're just sitting idly, like idle hands are the devil's workshop, you will lose your mind, I think, on Wednesday. We get to Thursday. The moon goes into Sagittarius and trines Jupiter. Thank God for Thursday. Thursday is the day that we all want. The moon goes into the Sag. The moon goes into Sagittarius earlier in the morning. And it trines, look at Jupiter's at 0001. So Jupiter's just about to move into Pisces, but the moon goes into Sagittarius, trines Jupiter, and it's like a tumultuous 3 days, and then you get to Thursday, and it's like, finally, I'm out of there. The moon's in Sag. I have more hope. I have more of a vision. I have more, faith. And as that moon trines Jupiter, Jupiter's at the last degree. Literally, it can't get any more last than this until it hits 0000. But this is, I think, one last little hey, you can do it. Like Jupiter retrograde at 0 degrees. Like, have you ever done something that you didn't think that you can do, but you were forced to do it, and you were so upset about doing it that when you got done doing it, you were just mad about doing it, so you don't even recognize that you just did that. And then maybe a little bit later, you're like, wow, I guess I did do that. I guess I did do that. That's kind of like one of these days. It's going to be a shitty 3 days. You're going to get out of it by Thursday. And I think you're just going to be so upset that you won't even recognize what you just handled and did. But there is a kind of a trophy here. There is some kind of a reward. But after the moon trines Jupiter, the moon's just hanging out on Thursday in Sagittarius. I just think Thursday's the day to really it's like the moon goes into, you wake up Thursday morning and there's going to be this, finally, we're on to something else. I feel good. I feel confident. And it's the time to have faith. It's the time to dream, to have a little bit more fun. What I love about Sagittarius and Scorpio is Sagittarius is the campfire and the stories that we tell around the campfire, right? If you're thinking about this in an evolutionary sense, Scorpio is after the kill or once everything gets dark in the winter, we all huddle around the fire and tell our stories, right? We don't want to think about the death that's going on around us, and we want to think about bigger things. Think about stories, tell a story, live a story, you know what I mean? Anything to get yourself off of the Scorpio stuff. So we get into Friday. And Jupiter goes back into Pisces. I literally can't believe I'm saying this out of my mouth right now. So here's the deal. Oh, did I not even say? Hold on. Oh, I didn't even write this down. So the other thing is on Friday, the moon, there we go. The moon will also be squaring Neptune, and it will square Mars, or it'll go opposite Mars. So I'll talk about that. But let's talk about Jupiter and Pisces for a minute. Number one, me and SJ have been talking about this, but we're getting very similar energy to the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're getting very similar energy to when JFK was assassinated. Again, guys, this week and next week, well, not next week, technically just November 8th, the world stage is going to change. And that's not going to stop changing for a while. Ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, we're never going, same thing since COVID, we're never going back to normal. But really, it will be very in your face. Something big on the world's going to change here. But Jupiter goes back into Pisces. What was going on in April for you guys? April and May. Jupiter was conjoining Neptune. Everything seemed grand and bliss and abundant. As Jupiter goes back into Pisces, this is that, this is the halfway point of the game. You're losing, and you got to have that pep talk in the locker room to be like, all right, how are we going to win this thing? I think as Jupiter goes back into Pisces, there's this focus on the truth. And also, too, I was right about the vaccine stuff, Mars square Neptune. Jupiter going back into Pisces, I think, is going to be more about the COVID narrative collapsing, because that's just what it's been so far since Jupiter entered in 2021 and 2022. And when Saturn goes in, more of the COVID narrative is going to collapse. But Jupiter going back into Pisces, I think, is really seeing the truth of the situation, really seeing the reality of the situation. Jupiter conjoining Neptune, I think you're going to see the the truth of where we were deceived, what we were lied to about. I think as Jupiter goes back into Pisces too at this time, and also too, we have a moon and Sag transit again with Jupiter and Pisces. I think this is a better time to dream and a better time to have a big vision. But I think that's just going to come at the cost of knowing the truth, which is the Scorpio stuff. It's It's like, have you ever had like I don't have any kids, but like if you had kids, like I've been a kid before and I lied to my parents all the time. But it's like, you ever had like a kid that lied about something and like something happened and then you found out what the truth is and you're like, oh fuck, this is actually what happened. This is kind of like parent moment where your kid has to tell you the truth and you're like, they fucked up. I just think as Jupiter goes back into Pisces, I mean, there's something I like about it, right? You know, it's Jupiter and its home sign, but like Jupiter's a very complicated planet. Like when you read all the traditional stuff, I'm pointing over here to my library. The Jupiter's a very complicated planet in my opinion. It's good, but it just rules so many different things in different circumstances. Like Saturn is way easier to like kind of predict stuff with versus Jupiter's kind of like a two-way street. But I think as Jupiter goes back into Pisces, I think there's going to be this bigger feeling of what is the truth, where you need to be honest with yourself. Where were you lying to yourself? Where were you believing deceit and lies and manipulation? And where do you need to be more honest? I think there's another side of this of Jupiter conjoining Neptune of like, you know, Neptune likes idealization. Neptune likes fantasy and illusion. So where can you channel that energy positively? Like as the moon's opposite Mars here too, when this happens, I think like Mars is about to go retrograde. Our plans are about to change. Our actions, our energy is about to change over. And I think as Jupiter goes back into Pisces, the moon goes opposite Mars, there's this kind of going, oh, now I know what the truth is. Now I have a different vision. And now I know how to, like the moon and Sag is like, this is my vision. As it goes opposite Mars and Gemini, there's this sort of like getting lost in the logistics of how to do it. And then when Mars goes retrograde in Gemini, you're just going to kind of do it. But this just kind of seems like Friday is a big, I don't want to say a reveal moment, but this is like, I think the path becomes a little bit more clear. And the path becomes clearer by realizing that the path that you first were on actually wasn't it, right? And I think the things become a lot more clear on where to go and what to do once the truth comes out. So that's Friday. Saturday. Oh, also too on Friday, let me go back here. On Friday, the moon will square Neptune, so there'll be some confusion on where to go, and then it's going to go opposite Mars and Gemini. You just got to get the data, you got to get the facts. The moon will sextile Mercury, that's nice. We get to Saturday though, and the moon will make a square to Jupiter, and then it will move into Capricorn. It will then sextile Venus, and Mercury will enter Scorpio. So Saturday is where it gets way more intense, in my opinion. Like Moon in Capricorn, Mercury in Scorpio, Venus in Scorpio. This is where we like embrace and accept the goth and the death stuff. Like, yeah, like Capricorn, Scorpio stuff. It's just business. Like that. It's just business. I think with the moon going into Capricorn, there's this kind of emotional shut off, which again isn't always bad. Like I think one of my biggest goals with my videos is how do I get people to accept the fact that astrology is not bad? Like, it's not like, oh my, like people are like, when are, like, I get comments all the time. Like, I just posted my 2023 year ahead horoscopes. Please watch my 2023 year ahead horoscopes. Please, please watch them. Thank you for watching them too. But I got all these comments of like, oh, it's just another bad year. Just bad. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to be in your little victimhood and your little victim story, which don't get me wrong, a lot of people out there have some really difficult shit that's going on right now. But if you're just using the astrology to be like, oh, well, it's bad, I guess I'm hopeless. Like, then yeah, you're going to have a shit year and things are going to suck because your mind is literally creating that. So when people might like, look, oh, this is bad. It's like, okay, well, like for example, Chernobyl was a bad thing, right? But that accident caused us to become much more aware of nuclear energy and have better safety around that stuff. So you could say that there was a lesson learned from that bad thing. That's what you need to think of here. There's going to be bad stuff that happens, but bad and negative is only a thing. It's only a measure of time. Like something could be really bad in one moment, but in a few years you look back and it was an amazing thing. You just didn't know it at that time. That's what I want you to think about with this stuff. And as the moon goes into Capricorn, like, you know, emotionally check out, detach from the emotions, do what work you got to do. The moon's going to sextile Venus in Scorpio. It's just business. It's no hard feelings. It's okay. Mercury's going to go into Scorpio. You got to say what you got to say. You got to be truthful. And Mercury in Scorpio too, like go for the guttural. Like something I love about Mercury in Scorpio is, you know, something I can't, because I'm a Mercury in Leo, so I just blab things out, and I have a Mars in Gemini. I'm like I'm really good at just like calling something out. And I love that about Mercury in Scorpio because Mercury in Scorpio is like if someone's hiding something, Mercury in Scorpio is like, you're hiding something. You're lying. And people are like, what? Mercury and Scorpio can also be extremely defensive and be like, like a ninja with their words or whatever, so they don't seem wrong. But when Mercury goes into Scorpio, like, you're going to have X-ray vision. You're going to be seeing through the bullshit. Like, accept that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I really hate the conversation in like dating nowadays where it's like red flags or this and that. Like, if you see someone for what they are and your intuition, your internal self is like recognizing that, maybe you should stop being dumb and listen to it. Like, I hate when people know what a situation is, but they don't listen to themselves. They listen to literally anything else but themselves. And then they find themselves in a shitty situation that they shouldn't have been in the first place. Don't get me wrong. I'm not perfect. I do this all the time. We're all human beings. We have to learn through this stuff. But when Mercury goes into Scorpio, like, you're seeing it. Like, you are seeing the bullshit. You are seeing through this stuff. Recognize that. And the other part about this is Saturday when we go into, where's my button here? When we go to Sunday, Mars goes retrograde. Mercury and Mars are in this weird mutual reception thing right now. They're actually in aversion to each other. And the moon will trine Uranus, whatever. Nothing, don't worry about the moon trining Uranus. I fucking hate talking about moon trining Uranus. Because it's nothing. But as Mercury goes into Scorpio and we're seeing what the truth is, we're seeing what's underneath here, Mars goes retrograde in Gemini. I think as we put on our X-ray vision, we go, oh, that's what's really going on. That's what the truth is. Mercury in Scorpio is all about investigation. It's all about security. It's all about the logistics of security. And when you have Mars retrograde in Gemini, Mars is like fights and conflicts, and in Gemini, it's kind of like information wars and stuff like that. And Mars is going to go retrograde where it's like, wow, I just got psyoped. This is definitely a big moment where a lot of people are going, whoa, I just got psyoped by something. But as Mercury's in Scorpio and then Mars goes retrograde, I mean, Mars has been here for a while. This isn't anything new. This isn't going to be a big surprise. But we have this is the end of October. So we have all of November, all of December, and just a little bit of January, the first 2 or 3 weeks of January of Mars retrograde, right? So 3 months is not that long of a time. For the full 8 months of Mars in Gemini, the retrograde is like the smallest part of it. But as Mars goes retrograde, there is this moment of going backwards of, okay, I'm using all of this information to fight, to argue. As Mars goes backwards, it's like, whoa, hold on. Now that there's new information, let me re-strategize. Let me get my game plan back together. And I think when Mercury goes into Scorpio, that's going to trigger it all. Where it's like, we're getting down to the root, the truth, what's hidden underneath. And Mars goes retrograde in Gemini based off this data, based off this information. I mean, like, this is really the time to make some great changes. I think as Mars goes retrograde, it's like, let's slow down. Let's go backwards a little bit. Especially like Mars in Gemini is very stimulation. Like, it's very distracted. Let's reel it in. Let's focus. This is all Scorpio stuff. Like, okay, for example, if any of you struggled in school, which I'm assuming most of you did, have you ever had someone try to like sit you down and tell you how to do something, but it's like the moment someone sits you down and forces you to, like, your brain just goes everywhere because you just like are in resistance mode? That's like this. Like, there's going to be this huge resistance to like focusing on the thing, but like, you have to focus. This is all the Scorpio stuff. Scorpio's about that focus. It's about that pinpoint. And if Mars, the ruler of Scorpio, is retrograde in Gemini, like, you got to get rid of the distractions. You got to get rid of the stimulation. What does that look like for you? Maybe that's getting off social media. Maybe that's getting rid of the stimulants. Maybe that's, just focusing on what you want and not distracting yourself with shit that doesn't matter to you. There's so many people are so worried about shit that has zero meaning in their life. Like, something I want you guys to think about going into the nuclear stuff. If this world goes to shit, I really want you guys to think for a minute. Are you doing anything that actually means something to your life? Like, let's say we all get blasted with a nuclear bomb tomorrow. Are you doing anything that has actual meaning in your life? Or are you wasting your time? Really? And this is the reason why I do astrology. This is the reason why I do my music. This is the reason why I live the life I live, is because I don't want to be 80 years old, if I even make it to that, and sitting on my deathbed going, wow, I had all of these opportunities to live whatever life I wanted to, and I created this bullshit. I didn't live what was in my heart. I didn't take action on my dreams. And I'm not saying if your dream is to be a football player and you're like 30 something, I mean, maybe if you're the best ever, but it's not about, living your most fantastic made up dream, but like, what is in your heart and what is the meaning that you have? And this just looks like, in my opinion, you might realize how distracted you've been, and it's really time to focus. Like, None, and this is just general life advice. I like, what are you guys doing? Wait, because this will hit harder if you are wasting your life away. Like, this will suck more if you are not living purposely. If you are just living, just going by the breeze and not having anything that you want to create, and that what value do you want to put in the world? What do you want to create? What legacy do you want to have? What the fuck are you doing with your life? Because I think if you don't have that answer, or at least if you're not on that path, this is going to feel like a nightmare. This is going to feel like, whoa, like where am I going? I'm distracted. I'm here. I'm there. Fuck the distractions. Focus on what you need. Like, you need to fucking focus. This reminds me of, like, I remember my dad. My dad was never like he was really never like an angry guy or anything like that. Which is kind of, he was angry, but not like violent or like aggressive or anything. He was just always like irritated. But it'd be really funny because I was always distracted as a kid. And God, there'd be times where he'd be like, Cameron, focus, like fucking focus for just a fucking second. Because I'm like, la, 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 like looking everywhere. I feel like my dad is like talking to me right now. Like, there is with the Scorpio stuff is you got to get real. You got to get raw. This is the Scorpio stuff is the stuff that we all hide, that we don't talk about, right? Scorpio's like sex, drugs. It's very taboo. It's not taboo in society anymore, at least in America. But we don't typically talk about that stuff. This is the stuff that we have to talk about. The stuff that we don't want to talk about, we got to talk about at this point. Let me get to next week. Is this? Yeah. Sorry, I thought I hit unrecord. Stop recording for a second. Next week, Venus conjoins the South Node. Purge. Let it go. That is all about purging. Venus goes opposite Uranus. I like actually Venus opposite Uranus because if you ever, like, for example, let's say you have a relative die. Let's say you have a grandparent die and you're going through all their stuff and you're getting rid of all of it. Or if you're a hoarder, if you're a fucking hoarder, please, for the love of God, get rid of your stuff during this transit. This is such a good transit for just throwing everything away. And when Venus goes opposite Uranus next week, this is like, oh, you forgot about that really expensive thing that you had sitting there that you can maybe make some money on. And then Venus square Saturn, and Venus square Saturn is like the worst transit like that you can get. And with Venus and Scorpio squaring Saturn Aquarius, it's just like nothing good is going to come out of this transit. The only good thing would be like viciously setting a boundary, maybe. And then Mercury conjoins the South Node. You got to do that mind dump. Like, Mercury and Scorpio, what are the lies that you tell yourself? What are the like Mercury and Scorpio is like, that person is totally not doing, like, is totally going against me. This person is my hidden enemy and X, Y, and Z. Mercury and Scorpio conjoining the South Node is one of two things. It's either you are just like spiraling in like this Scorpio is like, not trusting people and seeing beyond them. Or Mercury and Scorpio conjoining the South Node is, what fixed mindset do you have that literally doesn't work? So many of you have these. So I talk a lot about like the victim complex, but let's talk about like Mercury and Scorpio is like, you have a narrative that you tell yourself, and that narrative defines who you are. This is what victimization is often like. Like, for example, like if you've been victimized by something and you let that experience affect you, you will tell yourself a narrative about that victimization that sets up your life. I was a victim, so that means I can't do this, I can't do that, and that this is true and that that's true. I think as Mercury is in Scorpio and conjoins the South Node, is that's either going to hold you back. Like if you're a victim and you've been so victimized that you can't do anything but focus on that, you are going to have a horrible life. Truly, you're going to have a horrible life. But if you realize that it's the narrative that you tell yourself and the mindset that you tell yourself, and you realize with Mercury and Scorpio on the South Node, how stuck it makes you. Like, have you guys ever had some loser friends? I'm talking as someone who used to hang out with meth heads and drug dealers all day long. And you realize when you hang out with these fucking crackheads, wow, these guys are fucking losers. They have no fucking idea how the world works. And their mindset of thinking, tweaker fucking mindset of this guy's stealing from me and this and this and this and that. It's this gunk. I think of like the tar pits, like not the San Andreas tar pits. What is it? The La Brea tar pits. Like, you can get sunk in that mindset and you're going to be stuck there. This is the day, like next week is going to be the day where if you don't want to get stuck in that tar pit, you need to fucking really like let go of some shit. And it's going to be, and the way to not be stuck and the way to let go is being very clear on what the truth is, being very clear, like not bullshitting yourself. Like a lot of you guys bullshit yourselves. Like this is what I really hate about the loving yourself stuff is like, most of you don't actually really need to love yourself. Actually, most of you need to be way more critical because you guys suck. And I'm not saying this personally to you. I think a lot of you are great because you watch my show and we're all doing this work together. We're doing the astrology. We want better lives for ourselves. But a lot of you suck because you're refused to look at your horrible parts of your life, and society has generated this self-love thing where it's like, oh, if you're not perfect, it's okay, accept that. No, don't accept that. If you're not perfect, you're like, you either are in growth mode or decay mode. If you're like, oh, I have all these problems, but then your self-help love book goes, it's fine if you're not perfect, you should just accept it. You're going to go, oh, okay, it's fine to be this way. In your conscious, in your heart, though, you know it's not okay. Are you going to listen to this stupid self-love book, or are you going to listen to your heart and your conscious? Heart and conscious. When you listen to that internal voice and you listen to your conscious, listen to that. The hard part about that is what your conscious and heart is saying is going against everything that you might be doing right now, and you might have to accept that you might be full of shit, that you might be deceiving yourself, and that you're lying to yourself. Like, don't get fucking stuck here. And I bring this up because I think this is so important for society right now, because we have inflation, and we might be going into more inflation. We might have deflation here. We're going to be having so many outside circumstances influencing your everyday. We have lived in such peace. The last 10 years were so great compared to what the future has. And that's not to say that you can't have a great future. But what I'm trying to tell you is it's easier to believe your bullshit when society isn't challenging you, versus if we have inflation, if we have war, if we have this, if we have that. You got to be really real with yourself here. And you don't get the easy way out of just being able to distract yourself. Like, you got to be really fucking real when we get to this point. So that's my fucking final thoughts. I don't have any fucking final thoughts after that. Fuck you. I'm just kidding. But I mean, like, really, like, and I said this last year. The hard transits are the time to do the hard things. Sure, could you do the hard stuff when all the good transits happen? Sure, that would probably be good too. But if you're trying to have fun and enjoyment and all this good stuff when everything in the astrology is saying like this is really hard, you're going to have a hard time. Lean into the hard stuff. You know what I mean? Like, accept it, embrace it. It's only for a season. Life is seasonal. We're going into the fall and going into the winter. If you want to have fun, that's what next spring and summer is about. Next spring and summer is all about fun. It really is. Next spring and summer is great. I couldn't emphasize that enough in my 2023 horoscopes yet. Everyone's still going to say 2023 looks like a bad year for me. It's not. It's a good year. It's a great year, especially next spring and summer. This is the hard time though. And sometimes you got to do the hard shit before you can get the good stuff. You got to work before you make the money. So I'm going to leave you guys off with that. I love and appreciate you so, so much. Please like this video. If you like this video, it helps me out. Please comment for the algorithm, and I'll be seeing you guys next week.